Serious. Eerie towns, disappearing diners, and creepy gas stations. What's your true, unexplained story of being in a place that shouldn't exist? Story 1. When my brother and I were kids, our family went on a hike through the cemetery and into the woods not far from our house. My brothers and I would explore these woods every day. We even camped in them before. We knew it like the back of our hands. Anyway, as the family hits our usual spot by the creek halfway through, my brother and I say we'll be back in a few, and we want to wander off further up the creek. So we did. We came across a very large hill we had never seen before. It was littered with what looked like someone's worldly possessions, as if they turned a house upside down, shook out the contents, took the house, and left. There were tons of painted axes on the trees, showing someone intended to cut them down at some point. We poked around for a few when we thought we heard our mom hollering at us. So we turned tail and walked maybe 20 feet back down the hill to where our parents were. The entire encounter was maybe 45 minutes long on our end. As soon as our mom saw us, we got the scolding of a lifetime. We had actually been gone for almost 4 hours. She never saw us walk up any hill, and remembered seeing us meandering down the straight path by the creek, not turning up a hill that was 20 feet away. She, her husband, and her brother combed the woods for over 4 hours, screaming our names, and couldn't find a hide or tail of us. We pleaded our case and even tried showing her the hill. Surely she was messing with us, so we stopped up to the turnoff for the hill and it was gone. It is nowhere to be seen. For years, we explored the woods determined to find that freaking hill. We covered miles and miles of off-path woods. As we got older, we mapped it out. To this day, that hill does not exist. We never found it again. I never found the weird furniture, toys, clothes, and other household items that were scattered across the hill, and I never met anyone in the area who had a clue about the hill. We probably just wandered way further than we meant to, but I always found it weird that we never found the hill again. Story 2. Many years ago, I and 2 of my best friends decided to go for a day of mountain biking at Snowshoe in southern West Virginia. Now this was way before the days of GPS, so we were kind of doing this with some sort of directions and an old map, but the point is, we got very lost. Sometime along the way, we ended up in this very tiny little town and we figured we would ask for directions. It was absolutely deserted. I'm talking about not seeing a single soul anywhere. We parked the truck and split up, looking for anyone. Now this was at around 9 to 10 a.m., so not exactly the crack of dawn, mind you. We went to the post office, but nobody was there. We went into the only bar in town, which was unlocked and unattended, with music playing but not a single person present. We went from business to business and walked the streets, and after about 25 minutes, we finally found one old guy who just seemed to appear out of nowhere in the middle of town, walking alone. The first question we asked him wasn't even for directions. It was, "Where the hell is everyone?" To which he replied, "Well, I guess folks around here don't get up much until around noon." We asked him for directions to Snowshoe and he pointed to the road we came in on and said to go that way about 10 miles and make a right, and we will find the interstate. We left quickly. We all had a very bad sense of unease about the whole thing. As we left, we were about 5 miles down the road and hit a lady dressed up in a state road uniform standing in the middle of a very long straightaway holding a stop sign. When we approached her, she turned the sign from slow to stop. We asked what was going on. She stated that there was road construction ahead. We told her about what just happened and she just kind of laughed and said those people in that town are kind of strange, but let it slide. So we actually started talking to her, waiting for a line of traffic to come by from the opposite direction. We actually ended up talking to her for about 45 minutes to an hour. Kind of got lost in the conversation. Not one single vehicle ever approached us from the other direction or behind us. Eventually she said, "Well, I guess it's clear now and y'all can go ahead," and slowly turned the sign from stop to slow and motioned for us to go ahead. We went straight ahead, the only direction you could possibly go for the next 30-some-odd miles, and didn't see any signs of construction, state road workers, or maintenance going on at all. She had no vehicle. We figured she was a flag woman dropped off by some crew up ahead. After the encounter with the town and this woman, we had enough and called it quits. We turned on the interstate as soon as we found it and headed north and home. Every single one of us still remembers this whole encounter in vivid detail to this day. I asked my friend about it actually, about 3 months ago at this wedding, and it still freaks him out to no end. If you think these two had an out-of-this-world experience, you should check out the lake experience of the kids in Story 5. Story 3. This took place when I was younger. No one in my family will acknowledge it happened. The only ones who would cave to my great-grandpa have unfortunately passed away. No one will give me the time of day about it. My family has a cabin in Cook's Forest, Clarion, Pennsylvania. The cabin was built by my great-granddad and has expanded a bit over the years. It has a nice little nook at the bottom of a long dirt road off the main road and down a hill. There are a few other properties around, but most are up and off on the dirt road. Only one is down the hill and only halfway at that. It's not modern day by any means. There's no internet or cell service, and the TV still has dials you have to twist to get to watch a DVD. It's very rustic, and I love it. The property halfway down the hill is visible from any part at the front of our cabin, which is where the kitchen window, parking, porch, and fire pit are. For as long as anyone can remember, it's been this abandoned lot that had what was once a cabin with a concrete basement. The cabin was built on a hill, so half the basement stuck out from the hill. The remaining part was crumbling. It also was at the fork where we would ride our ATVs to get to the fire break, so even though it could have been creepy, it was a very common and familiar sight. Until one Memorial Day, which is when we opened the cabin after the winter and a large part of our family would go to the cabin for the long weekend to spend time together. Everyone would usually get there through the early evening and then all come together for my great-granddad's dinosaur pancakes for breakfast. So I woke up, expecting to smell pancakes and hear chatter from the older members of my family down in the kitchen, but nothing. I assume I've gotten up too early, gone downstairs to use the bathroom, and then gone back to sleep. Looking back, the whole upstairs was just mattresses with an aisle between them. I should have noticed that most beds were empty. I get downstairs and see all the adults outside, and I go out to say good morning and demand my T-Rex pancakes. I walked out and saw all the adults in my family in a kind of semicircle, facing an older man. I went back inside to wake up my cousins, but not before looking at the clock on the microwave and seeing that it was about 3 p.m. Sleeping until 3 p.m. was not in any way normal. I woke my cousins up, and by the time they all moseyed downstairs, the adults were all back inside. Everyone is pretty silent, but then Grandpa fires up the stove and gets us kids excited for dino cakes, so all seems normal. I was there with one of my aunts and my uncle. I saw my aunt was pale as a sheet, so I went to ask what was wrong. She took me outside and pointed at the aforementioned abandoned and crumbling property. In its place was a sprawling cabin mansion, a parking area full of SUVs and the coolest looking four-wheelers I've ever seen. My aunt tells me that the owners had come to say hi and invited us over to hang out with their nieces and nephews, as they were having a Memorial Day get-together just like us. I, having zero thoughts beside awesome four-wheelers, almost ran to the house, but my aunt caught me and rather forcefully reminded me of my dino case. I conceded and ran back inside to an atmosphere so thick with tension that even my underdeveloped brain could detect it. The oldest of the adults was acting normal and playing around with us kids, but something was very off. I finally asked what was up, and my aunt bonked me on the head and asked if I had seen the massive cabin mansion last year or the year before. We'd come to the cabin every few weeks until December. Did I see any construction? Well, no, but they invited us over and they have cool four-wheelers. Aunt Beth, come on! A resounding no from multiple family members made me almost flee and cry until my grandpa got down to my level and explained that he felt there was something weird going on. He said the couple didn't act right. I assumed it meant they were rude and that we should just keep to ourselves this weekend. They agreed and we went about our day, all adults keeping us occupied with activities either inside or behind the cabin. We get ready for bed, and I see my great-granddad, who had the only bedroom on the first floor, loading 3 shotguns, handing off one to my grandpa and the other to my uncle. To my shock and awe, my grandpa pulls out a bedazzled Glock from her purse. I went to bed with images of my little Grammy taking down a bunch of bad guys with her shiny pistol. I woke up the next day to the smell of pancakes and the sound of adults chatting downstairs. I'm sad because today is when we have to pack and leave, but things seem back to normal, so I'm very glad. I run downstairs, note that the clock says 7:30, but ignore all the weirdness, and sit in front of a plate of dino cakes that I dig into while asking my aunt what time we have to leave. Leave? We don't leave until tomorrow. Wait, what day is it? It's Saturday. We just got here last night. I notice just a bit of doubt in my aunt's eyes that I know something is up, and I run outside. The abandoned lot is back in its decrepit state. I resolve to brush it off, enjoy my ATV riding, and forget about everything pretty quickly. It wasn't until I got back to school that I was called to the main office where they asked why I wasn't at school on Monday. I told them that today was Monday. Nope, it's Tuesday, and my absence was unexplained despite several calls to my parents, divorced, neither of whom was at the cabin. So either my family played the trick of all tricks on me, or I'm living in an alternate universe where I can sleep into the afternoon. As I said, no one will even remotely entertain a conversation about this incident. Story 4. My grandparents have a big farm when I was growing up, and all of the grandkids would help work it over the summer when we were out of school. Anytime we saw a rabbit, we were supposed to get it with a hoe or grab the shotgun. Once, I saw a little rabbit in the beans and I didn't want my grandfather to see it, so I tried to chase it off. I followed it into the brush on the land, and for whatever reason, I just kept following it, because usually I'd lose sight of them pretty quickly once they hit the brush. I kept following it until I found what was clearly an old barn ruin. These are pretty normal to happen upon where I'm from, and they're fun to look around inside, so I went in. It was weirdly kept up really well, with antique tools in great shape and fresh hay. I worried I had crossed into our neighbor's property, so I hightailed it out of there. I asked my grandfather about it, and he said our land went way far past what I had described, and I couldn't have left our land in the short amount of time I was gone. So he followed me out of there and we couldn't find it. I checked every summer I worked there and never found it again. Not creepy, but it always drove me crazy where that stupid barn went. Story 5. In the 7th grade, I had a friend who lived near a beach in a bay in Lake Michigan. One day in early May, it reached 70 degrees, nearly unheard of for that time of year in northern Wisconsin. My 2 friends, including a beach friend, excitedly rode our bikes down the beach to maybe dip our toes in, expecting still frigid waters and then tan for the rest of the afternoon. The water, though, was surprisingly warm, like bathwater warm. In this particular area of the bay, the water was shallow for about a half mile out, and we joyously splashed around, wading deeper and deeper until we were about chest deep. As we dunked each other and swam with abandon, I started to feel sick. Bad headache, nausea, and wobbly. Just then, my other two friends mentioned that they also felt sick. We headed back to shore, nearly crawling by the time we got out. The three of us collapsed under a tree and fell asleep for 2 or 3 hours. When we woke up, we talked about how weird it was. I dipped my toe back in the water and was freezing cold. To this day, I have no idea what was in there. I do know that there was a chemical plant in town that used to manufacture things like Agent Orange and that their practices were known to be less than environmentally conscious. I have never touched that water since. Story 6. I was driving through Illinois to get to Chicago about a decade ago with a group of friends, and we stopped at a Taco Bell. The first thing we noticed was that the workers were acting very odd. Everything they said was monotone and rehearsed. After sitting in this fairly busy restaurant for a bit, we kind of just looked at each other at the same time as we realized that none of the conversations happening around us made any sense. The people were speaking and it was English, but the sentences weren't logical. They were just saying words to each other. We didn't say much about it until we got outside, at which point we all freaked out and confirmed each other's experiences at once and got out of there. We jokingly refer to that place as the NPC training center, since the people didn't seem to be real or they were learning how to be human or something. It still freaks me out. If you like watching these kinds of videos, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more. Story 7. This happened to a friend of mine about 20 years ago. He had been working as an installer of double-glazed windows and would often find himself traveling with a crew all over Kent in the southeast of the UK. One job he was doing wasn't all that far from home, so they decided to drive home instead of staying over at B&B. They set off home quite late in the evening and it was already dark. There wasn't much on the roads, and it was pretty cold, so there were not many pedestrians around. They were going along one fairly straight bit of road when they passed through a fairly unremarkable village. It was the usual things, like a pub and a corner shop, but little more than cottages. About 5 minutes later, a couple of his crew members were complaining that they really needed to drink and that there must be a pub around somewhere. He suggested that they turn around and go back to the village. They turned around and drive back, and there was no village there. It was just fields. There weren't any turnoffs, so they couldn't have been mistaken. It was just one straight road. Story 8. In my hometown, there was the hiking trail that people went to very infrequently. It was along the side of the Niagara Escarpment, so it had some climbable cliffs and some very shallow caves that you could crawl around in. I went with some friends one time and we were crawling around and found a cave that went pretty deep. We'd never been in there before. We'd never even seen it before. So we pushed forward and decided to check it out even though we had no flashlights, and this was when cell phones didn't really have a flashlight function. We stepped into the cave and it was easily 20 to 30 degrees cooler than outside. Upon looking around with the light we had, we noticed it was really clean inside the cave. As in, it didn't have beer cans littered everywhere, as all the other small caves did. While in there, we got a really eerie feeling after being in there shortly. Hearing weird and strange things, feeling like we were being touched, poked, and pulled, and not having any way to figure out who was doing it because it was too dark. We were just using lighters to see what was around us. We were convinced one of us was messing with the others, although anytime we sparked up a lighter, we were all decently far apart. We decided to hightail it out of there after only a few minutes, convinced to come back with flashlights. We came out to see that it was now dusk outside. When we entered, it was midday. Somehow we had lost roughly 3 hours inside this cave. We went back with flashlights the next week, but have never been able to find this cave again. Story 9. One time I was hiking around Arkansas with my wife and lost track of time. We ended up being too late for a camp spot at our intended place, so we had to search for another one. Eventually, we found a sort of ranch where the owners often let campers who had nowhere else to go, so all was well. It was a bit crowded with other campers, so we had to ask these college-age kids if we could camp next to them on their spot, and they agreed. The kids were nice and even helped with our tent, but they kept us up later than we wanted because they were loud and getting baked well into the night. Anyway, we woke up in the morning and I was just eating breakfast, getting ready and stuff when, out of my eye, I noticed someone coming out of our neighbor's tent, but I didn't recognize her. It was a woman who was much older than the kids from last night, followed by her small daughter. The college kids from last night weren't there, but the actual stuff was the same. It was really surreal. Everything was literally the same about our neighbors, except instead of them being 4 college kids, they'd been replaced by an older family of 3. Story 10. Many years ago, my family and I moved from California to Nebraska. We were driving through Nevada, and shortly after Las Vegas, we needed to stop and fuel up. We stopped at your typical old-school gas station that rings when you pull up to the pump. I don't remember it that well, but my dad told me it looked normal. We got out to stretch while my mom went inside to pay for gas. My mom said that when she walked in, the gas station had quite a few people inside. When she walked up to the counter to pay for gas, everyone turned to her and the lights went out. She ran outside, where my dad witnessed everything and helped her into the car, and we sped off down the interstate, not caring whether we ran out of gas or not. To this day, my mom says that's one of her scariest encounters because she can't explain or figure out exactly what was going on. Yes, we found a better gas station down the road and made it to Nebraska. Story 11. Not just one, but there are a whole lot of places in rural New Zealand that will scare someone who isn't used to it. Hell, even some of my Kiwi friends would sometimes be like, "Nope, I'm not hiking out of there with you guys. Good luck." We were doing a 5-day hike and had pretty good maps and directions. Now, there are a lot of nationally funded huts throughout the island, which are very well marked. We found this one random hut that was definitely not in the maps, with a bunch of older guys just hammered and partying inside, and this was way out of where these guys could have just walked up from town to party in the afternoon. No gear whatsoever, just the craziest looking 60+ guys hammered in this random unmarked cabin. When we came back later, the place was absolutely empty and musty, so they packed up their trash and stuff, but it still seemed all gross and dirty. We're all kind of baffled. Did we actually meet all these crazy hillbilly old men partying in the middle of nowhere? They obviously weren't going up there to clean it up, and where the hell did this cabin even come from just in the middle of these mountains? And how did they just randomly hike up there with cases of beer, booze, and speakers? Story 12. There's this old abandoned hotel a couple of hours away from me. It's not like a modern hotel, but like an old Victorian house that was turned into a B&B. It's totally boarded up. There's a big fence around it with a barbed wire. Apparently it's pretty damn haunted. In high school, me and some friends went to check it out. It's in the middle of this circular road, not a roundabout, but you can go around several times before feeding back into the main road. It takes about 90 seconds to go around the circle. Anyway, the first time we drove through, all the shades in the windows were drawn. We drive around again, only half of the shades are drawn. The next time we drove by, all the shades were open. We drove around one last time and all the shades were drawn again. We freaked out and drove the hell out of there. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. What's the most paranormal thing you've seen? Story 4 will give you major goosebumps. See you on that video.